All right, so this is chapter 7, which is deposit banking. I spent some time discussing deposits, different types of deposits, and the key to a deposit is 7.1. Warehouse receipts. The receipt gives you the right to get your deposit back immediately on demand. We call it's instantly redeemable. Redeemable on demand, okay? And we also discussed that deposit could be a time deposit, which acts as a loan. You transfer temporarily to somebody else for their benefit, or as a bailment, where you still remain the owner and they cannot use it. Then we discussed the concept of embezzlement, and I'm going to get into counterfeiting. Let's do counterfeit. Counterfeit basically means fake, not the real one, not the true one. Some people will have an original Rolex watch, and some will have a counterfeit Rolex, not the real. It's a copy, not original, okay? Or they'll have a Gucci watch, original, or counterfeit. So fake, sometimes they call it in this part of the world, it's a copy, not the real thing. All right, so what about the house receipts and counterfeit? So you put in $10,000, okay, you get your receipt. You put in $500, you get your receipt. You put $6,000, you get a receipt. You put $50, you get your receipt, okay? Well, here's what happens next. Next, you can use your receipt for $50, and instead of coming to the bank, get the $50, okay, and then make a payment to somebody else like her, you just give her the receipt directly. So the warehouse receipt, the receipt begins to act as a substitute for money. Substitute for money. Now, you don't need the real money, or she, instead of taking the real money, she'll just take the receipt. And when she needs, she can go to the bank and get the money from the bank. Same thing if it's a gold receipt or gold certificate. You can just give her the 1 ounce of gold certificate, and if she wants, she'll come to the bank and get the money back. Okay. So suddenly the receipt begins to function as money. Now, when the receipt begins to function as money, the next thing is, hey, I can issue a new receipt, an extra receipt, a counterfeit receipt. Okay, I can issue a counterfeit receipt and loan it out. Somebody else wants to borrow money. When they borrow the money, I can issue an extra receipt, loan the money, okay? And here's the key, collect interest on the money, okay? So what happened is the following. I got, let's say each one is one receipt, one receipt, one receipt, one receipt. So again, if you have 3 ounces of gold, I'll give you 3 receipts of 1 ounce, okay? You got 2 ounces of gold, I'll give you 2 receipts of 1 ounce. So each receipt is for 1 ounce, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So you got a total of 8. And I got a gold. This is the gold of 8 units. Now he wants to borrow. You two guys, put the 2 toys there so I can see them. The 2 toys go there to the ball so I can see them. Okay. So these 2 guys each want to borrow, let's say from me, borrow, and I'm not going to give them the gold. The gold is too valuable. I'm going to give them a receipt. I'm going to write a brand new one, and you got the guy a brand new one because they need to buy them a new phone, right? The old phone they were playing with all the time during the lecture has been confiscated. So they get the new one. So what do I have here? What's backing these 2? What's behind these 2? Nothing. Nothing. 0. Okay, there is nothing in here. So these 2 are counterfeit. Counterfeit means there is no real gold. Nobody actually deposited gold. There's nothing real there, but they can keep them. They can take the receipts. Now, here's the next question. If I issue these 2, if you keep your 3 coins here and 1 coin and 1 coin and 2 coins, as long as you're not all coming to collect your gold, and these 2 guys to collect the gold, I'm having 8 units of gold. Okay, gold is 8. So gold is 8, and I got receipts. Receipts are 10. So as long as 2, 3, 4 people come to get their gold, I'm fine. I got the gold. Okay. Well, here's the trick. The trick is I'm waiting for a month for these guys to pay me back with interest. So I'm doing these counterfeits for one big purpose. I want to profit from your gold by issuing counterfeit receipts, and I collect interest on it. The whole idea is that I issue the counterfeits and I collect interest. I profit by collecting the interest. Sure, I take a little bit of risk. Maybe they pay me back, maybe they don't pay me back. Okay, maybe they're trustworthy, maybe they're not. But I'm hoping they'll pay back. And if they pay back, I got an extra profit. That's what it's all about. So maybe I'm even collecting a fee from each one of you to store your money, but I'm collecting an extra interest. Okay, now we're moving to the next thing, and let me see how I'm going to make the next step. So these are fake, the counterfeit. They look just like the others. Okay, I made them. Okay, so I already got 8 original one, and I'm creating an extra 2. Okay, but they have nothing, 0. We call this, they have no backing. No backing. Okay. Now, the asset, which is backing a receipt, is called a reserve. You play with a phone tool there? No. The asset backing the receipt, the asset backing the receipt is called the reserve. The reserve is the asset. Okay? And the receipt is a liability. Well, the receipt is the same as deposit. So, the deposit is a liability. It means anytime you come, I gotta pay you back. The receipt is a piece of paper. You bring the piece of paper, I gotta give you back rice, or I gotta give you back the gold. Okay, so I got the reserve, that's the same as, in this particular case, gold is 8 units, and I got 10 units of liabilities. Okay, so this reserve to receipt is called reserve ratio. Reserve ratio is the, well, I can write it here, is the asset that you have available to the liability that you've issued. In my case, what's my reserve ratio? We measure it in percentages. What's the percentage reserve that I have? 80%. So I got a reserve ratio of 80%. Okay. If my reserve ratio is 80%, now comes the next, and here comes now the more important point of this chapter. What's the money supply? What is the money supply? Let's get back to money supply, and let me see. Okay, I can do this. There are 8 coins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Money supply is 8. That's very straightforward. Now, 4 of you will deposit it in the bank. Okay? So these 4 will get a deposit. So instead of you get receipt 1, receipt 2, receipt 3, receipt 4. Each receipt is for 1 unit, right? This receipt 1 is for money 1. Receipt 2 for coin 2, receipt 3 for coin 3, receipt 4 for coin 4, plus 5, 6, 7, 8. What's the money supply? Money supply is now 4 coins and 4 receipts equals 8. So, now comes the next important lesson, that depository banking is non-inflationary. That's extremely important. Is non-inflationary. So all you're saying, well, everything we've studied from day 1 basically is non-inflationary, okay? The only thing that we saw inflationary was debasement of money, okay? And now we're coming to the next. Number 1, you have the counterfeit receipts. Counterfeit. Counterfeit receipts. Now remember, here the money supply is 8. All we did is change the form of the money supply from coins to receipts. So 4 coins, 4 receipts. So the receipt begins to or continues to function as a money. It's a money substitute. We call this money proper. That's the real money. That's the money substitute. Well, now with counterfeit receipts, what do we have? Well, with counterfeit receipts, what is the here? What is the new money supply? The 8 units of gold plus 2 counterfeit units. So you got 8 gold plus 2 counterfeit, which is the same as 8 receipts which are true. We call these genuine. 8 genuine and 2 counterfeit for a total of 10. So, issuing counterfeit receipts, the counterfeit receipts begin to act as money, and it is inflationary. It is inflationary. Now, what's the effect of inflation? Number one, banker collects interest. And number two, you have the same inflationary process that we discussed in chapter 4, inflationary process. If they borrow the money and buy iPhones, they'll drive the iPhone prices higher, then iPhone manufacturers will benefit, and so on. If they decide to buy a house, they're going to stimulate the housing business, the construction business, construction workers. If they just decide to buy rice and, let's say, open a restaurant, they're going to benefit the farmers. So the inflationary process will benefit those who get the money first to be spent. This is the 2 extra units. So, number one, counterfeit receipts will increase the money supply. And number two, we mentioned embezzlement. The embezzlement worked how? You put in my warehouse, let's say, 100 kilograms of rice. Okay, I'll lend out 20 because you're not going to come and get the rice because you're not going to eat it all at the same time, right? So I'm going to lend out, so these 100 kilograms of rice will get 100 receipts. You know, when you're a banker, it's a lot easier to use 100 receipts, each worth 1 kilogram. You put in 4 kilograms, these are 4 receipts, okay? Because then you can use 2 receipts to pay somebody else. And now I'm going to embezzle 20 kilograms is embezzled. I'll take that one and I'll issue a new fresh receipt, or just I will loan the rice to somebody else, and you're going to give me back, let's say, 21 kilograms, okay? So, when I loan at the 20 kilograms, what I'm having is now 100 receipts. I'm having 80 kilograms of rice. So, before I have 100 kilograms of rice, so 100 kilograms of rice, I lend 20 kilograms to somebody else. Now I'm having at the store 80 kilograms of rice and 100 receipts. Okay? So, ratio. What's the ratio? Meaning the reserve ratio. The reserve ratio is, again, 80 over 100 receipts. It's again 80%. Now, if these were gold coins, for 100 receipts, you're going to have 100 receipts. But 20 gold coins went out, and now 20 gold coins circulate, just like the 20 kilograms of rice. So, the money supply will essentially turn out to be 120 if it's gold coins. You have 100 receipts and 20 extra gold coins. So, here's the important part to understand. Whether it's an embezzlement and it's a fake receipt, or whether you take out from the warehouse the real thing, the result is exactly the same. It results in a reserve ratio of less than 1. or less than 100%. It simply means that money supply increases. So embezzlement number 2 is also inflationary. So inflationary process includes counterfeiting, and the inflationary process includes embezzlement. Okay, this is inflationary. And remember, it is to the benefit of the banker. Well, who's losing? Who is losing the money? So I'm the banker. I'm collecting the interest on the lent receipts, on the lent rights, when I lend more. Well, who loses in this process is the question. Well, money supply increases by 20%. This means that prices on average in the economy will eventually rise by 20%. And this means that people who hold money in savings will see a higher prices, and they will lose 20% purchasing power. That's it. Now, this, let me see where I wrote it over here. Reserve ratio is this. So now we have the following. We call this type of banking, this type of ratio we call fractional reserve. Fractional reserve. The opposite of fractional reserve is 100% reserve. For 1,000 kilograms of rice in deposit, I keep 1,000 kilograms. For 70 receipts of gold, I have 70 coins of gold. Okay? For 2,000 kilograms of deposit, I got 2,000. That's 100% reserve. So, a banking system which operates on 100% reserve, we call 100% reserve banking. And a banking system which operates on a fractional reserve, we call fractional reserve banking. Okay? So now we come to the next important thing. Now we come to the next important thing. We said, first of all, in chapter 6, remember when I wrote the summary in chapter 6, is that loan, okay, let's do this. Banking, we said that loan banking was non-inflationary. That was the first important key. That's chapter 6. Second, today we begin that deposit banking only when you make a real, genuine deposit, okay? You don't lend out anything, okay? All you do is you replace the true coins with the receipts. The money supply remains the same. That was this picture over here. You got 8 plus 8 is also non-inflation. None. So now we get to the core of this chapter. The core of this chapter is that when you mix the two, when the same business engages both in deposit banking, where it accepts the deposits, and at the same time makes loans, meaning makes loans out of the deposit, two non-inflationary processes turn into inflationary. You take a non-inflationary loan banking, you just loan your own capital. You take non-inflationary deposit banking, you just hold the stuff. But when you take deposits to make loans, when you use the deposit to make a loan, this is the same as I wrote there, fractional reserve. Fractional reserve banking, let me repeat very clearly, means that you don't hold all of the deposit. Some of the deposit is loaned out. Join their phones to your phone to join their phone. Okay? Just put it there. You know? So the three phones can keep company to each other, okay? I'm going to keep me company for about 12 more, 13 more minutes. All right, so, again, to repeat for you special. When you put your deposit, but the bank does not keep the deposit, but lends it out, then a non-inflationary process becomes inflationary. Okay, now, who benefits and who loses is the question. So this fractional reserve inflationary profit, who's the beneficiary? Who benefits in this process? Who's the beneficiary? The banker. The banker collects interest. So the beneficiary is the banker. Well, because there was no genuine increase in productivity, we had an inflation growth, who's losing? Who's the loser in all of this? Well, many people on fixed income, and in general, people who keep their deposit at the bank. So one of the many losers is the depositor. Why the depositor loses? Because the inflationary fractional reserve banking increases the prices. You have $1,000 deposit last year. Now you have $1,000 deposit again, but prices went up by 20%. So you lose in the process. I mean, you all see it. Now, here today in Cambodia, well, like last year, 2 years ago, whatever, 5 years ago, the biggest losers are home buyers. Why? Home prices went up 20%. You gotta pay extra 20%. And then home prices went 20%. Okay? So if you deposit your money in the bank, you see housing prices go up by 20%, and maybe car prices going up by 20%, and other prices. So essentially, your money loses value when you keep it in the bank. And the bank engages in an inflationary fractional reserve banking. Okay? So that's the second part. So now, what is the loss? The loss depends on the fraction. With a 90% fraction, let's do some basic calculation. With a 90% fraction, what's the increase in prices or in money supply? Can you guys do that? Now's the time to open those eye toys. Okay? What do you mean 90% fraction? 90% fraction, it means you have 9 coins and 10 banknotes, okay? So, the increase in money supply is actually 10 over 9, about 11%, okay? With an 80% reserve ratio, this means money supply goes 10 over 8. The old money supply is 8, the new money supply is 10. Well, what's the increase in prices? Old money supply, new money supply. Old price is 8, new price is 10. So, they have 25%. Okay. Well, what about if the reserve ratio is 50%? If the reserve ratio is 50% over 100, this means that you have now old money supply is 50, the new money supply is 100. It's 100%. So prices go up a little bit when the fractional reserve is high. Well, here's the thing. If you have a fraction of only 10%, this means that you keep 10% and you have 100 receipts. This means that the new money supply will be 100, the old money supply will be 10. This is the same as 10 times. This is the same. We round it up to 1,000%, but technically it is 900%. Okay? So the more the fractional reserve, the higher. So if the fraction is less, this means the inflationary process is more. Okay? That's important to understand. So the more the banker profiteers, the more the depositors and other, we call them fixed income people. These are going to be just ordinary workers, ordinary employees, lose. All right, I got 5 minutes left, and let's see how I'm going to get to summarize and cover. So I did the embezzlement part, that was on 88. I did the counterfeiting part, that was on page 89. So that's the counterfeiting part, was on page 89. 7.2, where is this one, okay. So I did that part. Seven two is deposit banking and embezzlement. Embezzlement's on page 19. Okay, is it clear so far? So,
what is the common reserve ratio for most banks?
well, the common reserve ratio in modern days is about 10%. Well, some of the American banks will be running on a reserve ratio between 1 and 2%. In other words, they can have a multiplier of 50 times or 100 times, okay? But I'm going to be coming to that later. Common means, again, in some countries where people don't trust the banks, the reserve ratio may be 20, 30%. In countries like UK, in the US, the reserve ratio may be 2 or 3%. It's one of the reasons why sometimes developed countries may have significantly bigger and worse credit crisis when the crisis comes, which I'll be explaining in the next couple of lectures. But now I'm trying to finish with deposit banking as much as... So that's the embezzlement part. Okay, embezzlement is especially, and of course counterfeiting is especially appropriate for fungible goods. The more fungible the good, the more appropriate it is for embezzlement. You can't recognize your rice from the other guy's rice, or you can't differentiate your money from your other money. $1,000 is $1,000, okay? It's not in an envelope and it's not locked in. It's same 1,000. So fungible goods, and especially money, is especially vulnerable to embezzlement, and the same thing applies in general to, so fungible goods will be to embezzlement, and to counterfeiting. Okay, So that's number 2. Now, here in part 2, they already explain on page 91 how China and Chinese warehouses on page 91, how China and Chinese warehouses began to use this, I don't know, a few hundred years ago, 1,000 years ago, how over the course of 100 years, those warehouses began to store them, they begin to issue receipts, and over time they begin to issue more receipts than they actually have. We call this over-issue of receipts. So in China, in 91, we saw this process where early on, they'll just store whatever they receive, and later on they learn to issue a little extra. So instead of sticking to 100%, they stick to 90, and then 80, and then 70%. That's there. Later on in the UK, there were judges who basically said, oh, you put your money in the bank, it's a loan. So British Western law declared that if you put in a deposit, the deposit is the same as a loan. In other words, it's not your money anymore. This turns out to be today the law practically anywhere in the world. And you can check your own law. A lot of people, let's say in my home country, Bulgaria, were surprised and shocked to find out that according to the law, the deposit they put in the bank, which is how it's my money, no, according to the law, legally it's not your money, it's the bank's money. You lend the money to the bank, the bank becomes the owner, and it's a contract that the bank will return it back when they have. But it's not your money. The bank can use it any way it wants. Again, this is a corruption of the law. It is how people thought about it, and then how bankers made it to their benefit. Okay, that's important to understand. So, this part that the deposit is a loan is number 1 in UK, that's page 91. Page 91. The first case is called car versus car. Later on, number 2 will be divine versus noble. That's on page 92. And finally, number 3, Foley versus Hill. Foley versus Hill. Now, it's important actually you read this little thing and I'll read for you. So actually see what the judge said, what the court said, you know. Money, when paid into a bank, ceases, meaning stops altogether to be the money of the principal. In other words, you put your money in the bank, it's no longer your money. It is then the money of the banker. That's the law. It's the money. It's not your money. Now, all people think it's their money. But according to the law, it's not. People are surprised. They're surprised in Britain when they tell you that. It's like, no. But it is. That's the law. Okay. So, who is bound to have it? The money placed in the custody of banker is, to all intents and purposes, the money of the banker. To do with it as he pleases. That's the law. Now, next page 93, says the situation is worse or just about the same in the United States. So, page 93, yes, page, again, oh no, page 40, so guys, sorry, Foley is on page number 92. Page 93, the case in the US is just about the same. That's what it says. Now, So basically, they tell you, hey, you deposit your money in the bank, it's not your money anymore. It's the banker's money to do as he pleases. 7.3. Fractional Reserve Banking. Okay, that's on page 94. And I already covered, that it's a debt. I already covered the reserve. I already covered reserves to warehouse receipts. Reserves to receipts, okay. Reserve versus receipts. The reserve is the asset. The receipt is the liability. Fractional reserve banking. Basically, he's telling you it's a pyramid scheme. Let's see what else I got. Oh, and page 97. He explains that it is inflationary. Okay, I'll finish up to here and I'll continue with pages 98. All right, before we finish, question. What is the question you have? That's right here. Question? This is reserves. Reserve ratio is reserves divided by receipts. You have 8 coins and 10 receipts. So the reserve ratio is 80%. You have 2 coins and 10 receipts. The reserve ratio is 20%. All right, questions? Any more questions? All right, guys. I wish you a nice weekend. Please read carefully that chapter. I'll finish next time. And then we move on to the other chapter. And we had a